Hey y'all, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about Unit 1, Section 5, Casting and Ranges of Variables. We're going to split this up into two sections. The first section, which is this video, is going to be talking about casting variables. In the next video, we're going to be talking about ranges of variables and why variables have different ranges of values that they can represent. So we've already talked about primitive variables, and I want to focus on two of them. We'll set aside Boolean variables for later. In this lesson, we're going to focus on int and double. So remember three key things. A double type variable can hold an integer type variable. An integer type variable cannot hold a double type variable. And a smaller variable cannot hold a larger variable. Now, if you remember my analogy, I kind of used wet food, dry food to kind of explain the double type and the integer type containers. So I like to think of double, the variable type, as decimals, right? And decimals I like to think of as soup or another type of wet type of food. So imagine that soup container. And then I like to think of int as an integer as dry food container, okay? So, can a soup container hold dry food like rice or something? Yeah, it can, right? Can a dry food container like a styrofoam box hold soup? Not unless you want it to spill, right? So there's going to be some spillage. And finally, for this last example, I like to use the H-E-B milk type of thing. But it doesn't matter the brand. You can't have a quart container hold a gallon of liquid, right? So a smaller variable cannot hold a larger variable. So hopefully you understand this by now, and you either use my analogy, you memorized it, or you made your own analogy story to help yourself understand it. So once again, we have a bunch of variables. We have the integer types, integer, byte, short, int, long. Those are the dry food containers. We have float and double, those are our decimals. And we have char and boolean, but again, I want to focus on int and double for now. So the way to cast a variable is to have the variable type that you want to cast the value into and the value to the right side. So for example, imagine I have the value 5.1234. Now that's a decimal value, but I want to cast it, I want to change it into an int, which is integer type. So what I do is I put the variable type in parentheses to the left of the value I want to cast. So I put int in parentheses to the left of the value I want to cast. And that will change it into an integer. So remember, when changing a decimal to an integer, we don't round, all right? We don't round, that's key. Instead, we truncate. We go to the decimal point and we chop off everything to the right. So we chop off 0.1234 and it becomes a 5. Likewise, I want to turn this 6. Our value is a 6, and I want to turn it into a double type. So I put the variable type in parentheses to the left of the value I want to cast. So double in parentheses to the left of the value, which is 6, I want to cast. So that makes 6 into a double type, which is decimal, 6.0. So we can utilize casting to temporarily change the type of a value. So let's go ahead and look at this example right here. Up at the top, I have variable type of int. The variable name is num, and I assign it the value of 5. When I print num out, well, num is an int, right? So it prints out 5. However, look at the next print statement. I'm casting num as a double. So num is 5. How do I turn 5 into a double value? When I say double, you can think of decimal. Well, 5 in decimal form is 5.0. So 5.0. Now notice on the next line of code, when I print out num again, 5 prints out. Wait, what happened? I thought we changed num into a decimal type. Well, the key thing is, if you look at the previous slide, we are utilizing casting to temporarily change the type of a value. Okay? num has been declared as an int type. So num is holding an int type, okay? So an integer. When I cast it on this line of code, I'm temporarily changing it. I'm saying, hey, I want you to treat the value inside of num as a double temporarily, okay? But num on the next line of code, it's still an int type. The value, the type of variable, it hasn't changed. Num itself is still int type. But what I did on the previous line is I said, hey, I want you to temporarily consider the value inside of num as a double. All right, so next we declared decnum as a double type, and we assigned the value of 4.24. When I print out decnum, out prints 4.24. And then when I cast decnum as an int, remember, we're not rounding, we're truncating from the decimal to the right. So I go to decimal, chop off everything to the right, and decnum as an int is 4. Now, when I print out decnum again, it's still 4.24 because decnum has been declared as a double type. This line of code right here is only temporarily considering the value inside of decnum as an int, but decnum is still decnum. Now, let's go ahead and do this one. In this line of code, I'm declaring testnum as storing an int, all right? So int is the variable type, testnum is my variable, and I assign it decnum cast as int. So decnum is currently 4.24, and I want to cast it as an int. So what is decnum casted as an int? It's 4. So I assign the value of 4 into testnum. Now remember, testnum has been declared as an int. So on the next line of code, when I print out testnum is an int. And what is the value inside of testnum? 4, right? I assign it right here. So outprints 4. But what's inside of decnum? Remember, decnum has been temporarily, the value inside of it has been temporarily considered to be an int right here. But decnum has been declared as a double, and the value inside of it is still 4.24. Okay? This is probably the trickiest thing, understanding the difference between temporarily casting it and assigning that value to a variable type. So make sure if you didn't quite get it, go through this video again, pause, rewind, and make sure you can explain it to yourself and appear how this exactly works. Now right here, I have two integers, okay? num_a and num_t, and they have the values of 5 and 2. This slide shows a very, very common application of casting. So typically, when I do 5 divided by 2, num_a divided by num_t, remember, integer divided by integer, the result, the kid, must be an integer. So 5 divided by 2, you and I both know it's 2.5, right? But because the kid has to be an integer, we go to the decimal, we chop off everything to the right, and what is 5 divided by 2? It's not 3. Oh, it's not 3. If you're thinking 3, you're thinking of rounding. We truncate, remember? So 5 divided by 2 is 2. Now, oftentimes, we don't want it to truncate, but we do want to keep the actual values as ints. So what can we do? We actually cast one of them as a double. So right here, when I do num_a divided by num_t, notice num_a is being temporarily casted as a double. So what's inside of num_a? 5. And this is saying, I want you to temporarily consider the value inside of num_a as a double. So this would change it to 5.0. And 5.0 divided by 2, well, that's a double and an int. The kid is a double. So 5.0 divided by 2, kid's a double, it's 2.5. Now, similarly, you can cast the numerator or you can cast the denominator. It doesn't matter, right? Because remember, as long as one of them is a double, then the kid is a double. So in the next example, I'm casting the denominator as a double. So an int divided by a double is still a double. So 5 divided by 2.0 is 2.5. All right, now I have an exercise for you. On this slide, I have 4 variables: an int type, a double type, a long type, and a short type. I want you to predict first whether the following lines of code down here will work. Can I put a double type inside an int type? Can I put a long type inside a short type? Remember, a decimal inside an integer, a 64-bit number inside a 16-bit container. Can I cast decnum and put it into num? Right? I'm casting this double as an int and trying to put it into an int. And can I cast this big num, which is a long type, and put it into num? And can I put this 32-bit number inside a 64-bit number? Try using those analogies that we used earlier to help you explain and understand this. Now, again, you don't need to know short or long for the AP exam, okay? But you do need to know at least this line right here. Can I cast a double as an int and put it into an int? Okay, and can I put a double into an int without casting it? All right, go ahead and give it a try. In the next video, we're going to go over ranges of variables. See you in the next video.